everybody, and welcome back. I've got to say that's my favourite little jingle. And it's great to see so many people coming into the sessions. You're in for an absolute treat. It's my pleasure and privilege to introduce Dr. Johanna Funk from the College of Indigenous Futures, Charles Darwin Uni, and we've been chatting beforehand about the bowerbird, about how wonderful this international space is, and how, as Joe says, nobody is faking it, and to be in such an authentic space is a privilege. Joe, you're going to be talking to us about your research into open practice and workforce capabilities. So I'm going to shut up now. Hand over to you, my darling.
Thank you. Okay, so as Lou just said, I'm Johanna Funk. I'm from Darwin in the top end of Australia, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about my GoGN fellowship that I'm just about to complete in exploring links between the cultural studies content I'm teaching here and open practice and job readiness. I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I'm sitting tonight here in Darwin. It's Larrakia country that Darwin sits on. I want to extend my respects and acknowledge the elders past, present, and emerging on the countries here, as well as where you're sitting today. This is a cultural protocol and shifts cognitive gears and situates ourselves in relation to the knowledge, to respect the frameworks shared by us, by the senior authorities also involved in this work I'll share with you today. Oops. So where I am, just very quickly, this is Darwin up here, and we've got a population up here about maybe 200,000 with the COVID influx. Our CDU here is a dual sector university, blended delivery. About 30% of students are actually on campus here in Darwin. The rest are across Australia, and there's only about 20,000 of them. We also have a very significant vocational trade sector as well. The federal situation in Australian higher education has been interesting. And some of you may be familiar with the big job ready focus, but that's actually ended up in humanities courses being doubled in price of the sciences, nursing, and teaching, fortunately for us, in our college. We've been restructuring for about 5 years, and we've just amalgamated with College of Education. So it's kind of like Indigenous Futures and Education now, which is really great for those of us that work in a lot of interdisciplinary ways. I renovated this curriculum because it's also an interdisciplinary curriculum for the students who join us from across the colleges in the entire university. So I have IT students, engineering, health, midwifery, teaching, pre-service teachers, etc. So we worked with some senior people to renovate the curriculum after it had been running for 10 years. And with this job ready focus, I had this bugbear about how it was kind of excluding in the same kind of funding package as the humanities ideas, and the way that I happen to teach in humanities. So I decided to look at that in my fellowship, which built on my PhD. Very briefly, was 4 case studies focusing on social policy projects at the Northern Institute at CDU. And those 4 online digital projects intersect at Indigenous knowledge systems, social policy and workforce development, such as, as you can see there, police and fisheries and these types of things, and biosecurity frameworks, as well as the online and open contingent of it, or aspect to it. So a lot of participants actually were authoring the resources. That's a really complex thing that I'm taking forward into the practices in the unit that I'm teaching, because these intercultural contexts really, as a lot of us are starting to really discuss a lot more, aspects of open aren't always monolithic in these situations. So I've got a Menti link in the chat for those of you who want to participate. I also have some questions about how people might be experiencing some of these principles in their settings. What I found from my thesis, and also how I'm translating that into the fellowship, was how we use language develops understanding about different concepts, how we situate learning in realistic context for students, that recenters their experience of their learning so that they feel confident going out of our classes, and also transforming that provision and dynamic into a participatory authorship and exercising of people's knowledge sovereignty. So if you want to have a think about that, the Menti link's in the chat again. This slide will come up again, but as well, feel free to put something in the chat if you want to. Oh, sorry. So how that translates into workforce, I thought, well, when we do OEP in our jobs, we perform our technical and professional duties. We contribute and communicate in a lot of different ways. We are especially working remotely if we're lucky to have the kind of job that allows that. And that and those open practices enable us to then situate our work and review and share our work with people. And so we're encouraging students to work and understand different perspectives across colleges so that they can then relate it to other wicked problems they're going to have to solve in their lives. And finally, we can incorporate OAP with these culturally informed perspectives on what a workforce actually might be, and how workforces have their own cultures. And that the learning might actually be something that extends beyond the classroom into civic, responsibilities and understanding about including people in knowledge practices. So some examples. Some examples are, just checking my time, pardon me. This is the first one. These are the wonderful senior authorities and YOMA lecturers we've been working with. They put together this framework that acted as a kind of backbone for the entire unit. This is like cultural knowledge authorities, literally, talking about ways of being and doing in the world. And so Ian at the top left there provided this map of Wanga, which is land, and how stories and language and rules and how we do our jobs are all related to these stories and these ideas here shared by Bukunoi, Mercy, Stephen, Joy, and Kunjoy and Boy. So these are these wonderful people that we worked with for a week before we developed the rest of the unit. We also assign assignments based on real world events. And this is a little bit sensitive, but we create a space that's really safe for students to not take sides, but engage in seeing multiple perspectives, engaging their critical thinking. We open up the discussion board for them to share drafts and ideas and demystify a bunch of the kind of the Western critical engaged pedagogies that some students aren't used to. There are a lot of students that are used to taking exams, so we share that. Oops, pardon me. We also polled students to develop some consent around how they want to spend their learning. So that developed a really nice high flex model in the unit. So out of 500 students every semester, only about 100 show up every week for online. During our tiny pivot here we had in the territory of 6 weeks. But that also enables students to not have to feel like they have to come to class even if they are enrolled internally. Those discussion board actually sharing, you'll see that like 400 students shared a draft of their assignment. I'm just going to tell you, drop a little thing in there that we've actually seen a huge drop in plagiarism. So I don't know what the relationship is there. I'm still doing my analysis, but we might be doing something right. We also have a press books that students have added their work to, and that's also kind of motivated a lot of students to share their work for a different audience and budding writers and journalists. So with those examples in mind, I went through the developmental evaluation, and every semester for the fellowship, I evaluated and adjusted the previous or the next one with using the principles from my PhD, the graduate attributes, as well as digital information literacies and workforce readiness criteria from multiple government and corporate research documents that I trolled through. I analyzed the unit content and processes, but also had ethical clearance to use student evaluation comments, which were already de-identified, and work samples that mentioned their learning experience. Excuse me. These are the workforce readiness skills. Does any of that look familiar? Any of those skills? It's actually quite interesting, I think. Some of those skills to me look like a lot of the stuff that happens when you're collaborating and doing open practices. So once again, how do you see these principles and practices showing up in your settings, and what is the most useful in your open practice? Do you think about how you use language to develop multiple different skills? I mean, these principles of engagement and cultural capability are also really held up, I think, by the open practices that that we're using in the classroom. Online in high flex and asynchronous ways. It's actually been a really wonderful, and I'm about to show you some wonderful feedback samples from just a tiny bite of what students have said about connecting with other students, about becoming a primary school teacher, being able to communicate on sensitive topics. Being a male in my engineering profession, I need to understand I have privilege. I need to be more self-open and reflective as a psychologist. In my IT career, I'm going to build more respect for my team members. In a male-dominated industry, I need to mitigate the imbalance. I will use my privilege in the humanitarian aid field to promote more equity. So students are using this language, but they're also talking about how the learning experiences help them. And this last comment is wonderful because she says she wants to emulate, or he wants to emulate what they've experienced online. So the anonymity and simultaneous inclusivity has helped them achieve the learning outcomes. And I think that was a really nice way to put it, because that's that lurking is still learning. New IT skills, critical thinking strategies, all that was up here. So I was really chuffed to find a few of those things. I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into some of that data. I'm ahead of time. But again, just to look back at how people can manage their time and their delegation skills, gaining independence and confidence for future tasks. Openness and open and safe place to work collaboratively. So we're really happy that students felt that way, especially in such a huge unit with, like I said, over 500 students 3 times to 5 times a year. So thank you very much. I don't know if I've got time, but I would really love to share my zine if possible, if no one has any questions. But I also need to remember to spruik the second round of the fellowship with this link here. It's an amazing opportunity, and this just really set me up for something to press on with after the big PhD swamp. So thank you so much again, Gojien. Do consider joining or getting involved or promoting it in your setting for the students that are working through their open practice research. One more minute. Here's my zine. So this is my zine, which I'm excited about. Can I share it? Do I have enough time?
Oh, please, go on. Do it.
So again, I'm learning how to communicate better with my research outputs to different audiences. And so I did this thing about sharing what I do with the visual thinkery workshop on Tuesday. So I did this cute little thing. So this story is like, I create space. Students need space. Thank you. I can't see myself. Students need space in online learning. I give them tools to build their learning in their way. And they feel they own their own learning and feel confident in their world. And I was really proud of myself because I didn't use any teacher talk or any of that big theory jumbo stuff that my brain's been in as a PhD student for so long. So back to my primary school days. So thank you very much. I would love to hear what you've got to say if you have anything to say.
Yeah, people are really blown away by how thought-provoking that was, the results that you had there, and in particular, quite a few people really loving the model and really struck by, that thing you said, you've still got to examine it, I understand, but, so much less plagiarism and lots of speculation going on in the chat about why that might be. I mean, what are your initial thoughts? So we're not holding you to it because we know you still got to, look at that data, but what are you thinking?
Oh, I'm so excited because this thing about work readiness has already given me a bit of a bugbear because of it's coming from a certain source, but it's always been something that I've always wanted to offer students in terms of a very practical outcome. I mean, we're lucky, excuse me, we're students that like to learn and stay in school and continue to engage in that space, but a lot of students have the outcome in their mind of, I want to work out there. And so I wanted to just try and find ways to keep linking. And I've started working with the engineering and IT college, and I've already got a few interviews of industry reps talking about their workplaces as cultural settings. But they're using industry language, so that's a very cool development that I'm starting to grow a bit more to be able to do.
That sounds so interesting. I think, yeah, Catherine, they're wonderful, Johanna and Go GN, and yeah, really resonating with what you are saying. I think it was Verena in the chat who was saying, maybe I can't think of your exact words, Verena, but maybe we need to think differently now about how open educational pedagogies make a real difference to what we think of as cheating or plagiarism. Yeah, of course, Verena said it so much better than me. To what extent does open educational practice or pedagogy reduce plagiarism in a digital age? Yeah.
I think that would be amazing because I'm not trying to make too many correlations. I mean, we've obviously done a lot of different stuff in the unit, but I had taught it before we renovated the curriculum, and it had been running for 10 years, and there was a big difference in a lot of things. So that's one thing. But I also think, I've also kind of cringed a little bit about it's so almost so conservative to try and align open practice with the job readiness agenda and these types of things that I'm like, well, that's actually not what I'm coming from, because I'm actually saying that open practice already does all this stuff. So we don't have to create this entirely new thing about job readiness. It's just adopting some of these practices and get students involved in their learning. Maybe they might feel more confident in their world and they join it more. So the student feedback has shared a little bit of that. Sorry, you went quiet.
Yeah, no, I think Isabel quite rightly is helping me manage my many dying devices here, bless her.
Sorry, Isabel.
And I was on mute. But I think there's been echoes throughout the 2 days of, let's be just really pragmatic here about, people want jobs, they want to be ready for work, they want wholeness, they want to be trusted, don't we always, as students? And, that's sort of a real new approach that there's been so much resonance between what you've talked to us about now, Joe. Christina Hendricks is saying she's working on a research project right now about students writing open case studies, and they've talked a lot about learning to cite and making sure they're doing it correctly rather than, that citation is a practice that has reason, Christina, isn't it? Rather than just do it this way and just do it that way and we'll keep you on the outside.
Right. And I've had a lovely conversation just this morning. I taught a very early class this morning, and it's like 12:30 here now, so I'm like a little bit out of it today, so pardon me. More than usual, but I had a lovely chat with a student today who's new to all of this. And I said, well, it's kind of like acknowledging the traditional owners, in that situation. We're in an institution that does this academic practice, and all these people did this work before us, and we're just using it to bump up what we think. So you tell, so tell me a story about that. So I encourage those students, because they're also from so many different backgrounds, that they're not obviously going to be academics, all of them. So yeah.
Mute myself. It's a beautiful place to end. Thanks to everybody who's come along and for an amazing conversation in the chat. Joe, you can catch up with it later on YouTube. Thank you, my friend, so much for coming along. I know you're not feeling 100%, but full of energy, full of life, and full of thought-provoking ideas.
I'll just dab my nostril.
You take care.